So, welcome to my 2022 tier list for all the books that I read. So, in here is 35 to 36 books because I'm quite a slow reader, and there are a few kind of stipulations to get over. First of all, this is very subjective because it is my list and it is my reads. Second of all, you'll probably notice that there are a lot of good books on here. So, if you see your book maybe that you really like and it is ranked lower than you would think, it's probably because of the company it's keeping. I didn't do a lot of reading for many years, so when I came back to reading, I had everything to read. I could choose from all of the great fiction that is out there, and I've gone and done that. Basically, I've picked up a bunch of recommendations. I've really run with them. Obviously, there's a lot on here that you might think, oh, this is a striking omission. If I was my first year getting back into reading, but again, it took me a while to kind of get going, and I'd already made several decisions by that point. So a lot of the books here, you'll notice the categories down the side. The lowest category is average at 2.5 stars, and that's a rough guide. The star guides on the side are a rough guide, and there is no kind of tiers below that. And the reason is I did not want to get bogged down reading anything that I thought was any chance could be below average. There'll be no bad books here today. The average will be where it begins, and it will work its way up to some really classic reads. So I'm going to start by just moving to the front of this average pile here. Dark Souls Mask of Vindication by Michael A. Stackpole. So this was the lowest rated book that I read this year. So I'm going to use this as the baseline. I gave it 2.5 stars. Maybe it deserves somewhere in the kind of 2.3 to 2.4 range. But Michael A. Stackpole is quite an experienced author, especially in the sci-fi fantasy genre. But this book was a bit ham-fisted. I feel like he spliced some different ideas together. It didn't necessarily come together in the end, and it was a bit of a mixed bag. So that will be our baseline for everything going forwards. So the next book here I've got is, and these aren't in the order I read them. This is just a random order, but here is Island of Dr. Moreau by H.G. Wells. So I read this as summer kind of turned into autumn, and I wanted something a little bit creepier. And this was a really good read. I'm actually going to move it up into the great category. I feel like it really delivered on some of the themes, and it was a really good. It created a really good setting. I really enjoyed, H.G. Wells' style of writing. The next book I have on here is Emperor of Thorns. So this book actually was the last book in the Broken Empire trilogy, and in my opinion, it was arguably the best book in Broken Empire trilogy. And I think that what was created in the first couple of books by Mark Lawrence felt like it might be going a little bit off the rails. And I know a lot of people have put the series down during King of Thorns, the second book, and I totally understand why. Mark Lawrence loves to work with different timelines, and this book I'm actually going to move up to excellent. I feel like it really delivered on its themes, and the ending was very satisfying. And I just can't believe that he managed to kind of funnel all of that stuff from the second book into a conclusive peak. It's really a diamond as far as trilogies go. It comes very concise beginning, opens up into, I wouldn't say a mess, but there's a lot of set pieces and a lot of timelines and a lot of plot points, and he really allows them to converge in a very satisfying manner in the third book. So I'm going to move that one up to excellent. I'm going to pick one randomly from the pack here. The Great God Pan was kind of a Victorian horror read, and it was actually one of the better books that I read in September. And I remember thinking, wow, this really feels Victorian. And obviously, it was written at that time, but it felt like reading, a Sir Arthur Conan Doyle book or something like that, but with a horror setting, which I really appreciated. I'm going to move this up into very good. I probably placed it slightly behind Island of Dr. Moreau, just because I thought that delivered on bigger themes, and the setting I felt was a little bit more well realized. The next book I'm just going to grab, let's go with Sharp's Tiger. So this is the first Sharp book chronologically, and the first one I read as I'm reading them in that order. And I'm going to just move it just in front of Iron Dog Tomorrow there. That book was a thrill ride, and these are always action-packed books by Bernard Cornwell. I really appreciate the set pieces, and I definitely love the characters in the Sharp books. Very underrated as far as characters go. Let's go with the Two Towers, a controversial one next. So, I'm actually going to move the Two Towers right in between Iron of Dr. Moreau and Sharp's Tiger. Now, this is maybe a little controversial because I know people loved Two Towers, but for me, the weakest book in The Lord of the Rings and one of the weaker books in the Legend of Middle Earth. I would actually go as far as to say that I think it got a little bit bogged down, really, with trying to get the working parts of the storyline and the different characters' journeys and getting them to reconverge again for the final book. I think it does suffer from that middle act syndrome. And though there are parts of the book that I absolutely adore, I believe it did lose its way a little bit, unfortunately, though I certainly still loved it. So it will sit there in grateful now. Let's go down and find ourselves. Here we go, it's a little bit different. Pines, that was another September read. I'm actually going to bump that just there in front of the Two Towers. Very controversial, I know. This was a real page turner, a thriller with very good plotting, and I really appreciated a book like that. You know, kind of a 300-page. You know, you don't want to put it down. You want to get to the next chapter, find out what happens. Really good pacing, and it was really refreshing at the time it came in. I would say, you know, if you want to read the Wayward Pines trilogy and you're into thrillers or you're into horror, either way, I think that's a good place to start. Here we have a bit of a classic. This is the Phoenix and the Sword. This is Conan. This is the first book that I began reading of Conan, and this is the one that was described as the best starting point. I'm actually going to pop this one in above average. This was really close to getting a 3-star from me. I felt like it, because of its short nature, it tried to tell maybe a little bit too large of a tale for its kind of word count, and it felt a little bit rushed in places where there's glimpses of great world building and great characters in there that don't really get a chance to form properly. But certainly a very entertaining and bombastic little read, The Phoenix on the Sword. Another short story I read was H.P. Lovecraft Call of Cthulhu. So this I felt was a little bit more of a recounting of events and a little bit of investigation around some mysterious and spooky events that took place. And it's a dark. The subject matter is pretty dark in Call of Cthulhu, and I feel like H.P. Lovecraft certainly delivered on what he was going for there, and more than anything, he kind of created the kind of baseline or the history for a world there. And so it was the first book I was told to read in the Cthulhu mythos. And yeah, I felt like that was probably perfectly pitched as a beginning point, to be fair. Right, let's talk about a great straight up Pride and Prejudice. So from where this book started, I was feeling maybe like a 3.7, 3.6. The first 100 pages didn't wow me. Though there was some good wit in there and some good dialogue, there wasn't much else, it felt like, for the first 100 pages. But, oh, come on. By the end of this book, the ending is fantastic. And the characters, once you spent some time with them, there's so much depth there. And I feel like Jane Austen really had some interesting things to say. If you go to my review, I had to quote actually some of the book because it really stuck out as really insightful writing by Jane Austen. And I'm actually going to move Pride and Prejudice up into excellent. And you know, if anyone's thinking maybe this isn't for me, you'll probably still be thinking that in the first 100 pages. But by the end, I really think you'll kind of get what was being gone for there for sure. Right, comedy. So here's Mort. Where would I put Mort? Probably quite comfortably in the great category. I found Mort very entertaining. I found it a little bit jarring at first. No chapters, and you kind of jump around in the world, and it's a little kind of discombobulating at first, but really the humor pulls it through, and the plot's pretty good as well, to be fair. And you feel invested in the characters by the end, and you'll have a chuckle along the way. And it's a pretty solid 4-star read generally. Talking about pretty solid 4-star reads, I feel like this Assassin's Apprentice. Where would I put Assassin's Apprentice? Let's just whack it. Yeah, I'm going to whack it just here next to More. I don't know which side of More. They're very similar books in the far as quality goes. The prose in Assassin's Apprentice, as with all Robin Hobb's books, is very, very solid. And the character work, obviously, is what she's known for. I would say more than anything, what I liked about Assassin's Apprentice was that slice of life, that slice of castle life that is introduced to the main character, and the kind of family, extended family kind of relationships that form around him were really kind of heartwarming and interesting. And yeah, I think Assassin's Apprentice is a good first book in a trilogy. Right, Salem's Lot, my first Stephen King read. I'm going to place that above Emperor of Thorns and even above Pride and Prejudice. Salem's Lot was excellent. Really, really excellent. I feel what a great first chapter, what a great second chapter. I mean, it starts off on such a good foot, and I really didn't think that King would be able to stick a landing when he started so strong. But you get to just immerse yourself in the little town and its day-to-day routines and the characters, and you end up with so many different people that you kind of hope are going to be okay, but probably won't. Who's going to survive? What will happen to the town? It's a great horror book, but it's more than that. It's a great slice of life book, a fantastic slice of life book, and I think it deserves its place in the top tier of my reads of 2022. The Children of Hurin. I'm going to place The Children of Hurin at the top of the great list here. So this is a bit of a reread, to be fair. There are rereads in here. I'm not going to exclude rereads from the tier list because they are part of my reading schedule for 2022. And I feel like a reread is kind of treacherous because it could really improve your opinion of a book, or it could it could really slide. I mean, if you've got a lot of nostalgia for a book, a reread could really hurt its standing. But I think The Children of Hurin, pretty much exactly as I remember, very good prose, very poetic, lots of really pure themes in there. It's a tragedy, and it's akin to the Greek tragedies, really. A very fine piece of storytelling, and a part of the kind of extended Middle Earth kind of legendarium that I would say is definitely worth reading. Right, let's go with another great. I was not expecting this book. The cover for this book, I don't appreciate. I don't appreciate having like a sword and a word. I know it probably sells very well and it's very eye catching, but it's very strange. I'm going to put Malice currently at the top of the books I have read here so far. Now, I was surprised by Malice. I'm going to put it out there. I don't think the prose is amazing. I think it's average. And I think the character work is excellent. I think the plotting and the story are excellent. And I think those two things really allow, and also the kind of the themes in there are quite strong as well. But I was surprised that a book I could regard a book so highly when the prose isn't the best and the world building is above average, but it's not quite top tier. But the character work, the story, the plotting, the themes, they're so good, and it's so well paced. it's a fantastic page turner. It's not a short book. It's over 600 pages, but it's going to feel like it was 300 pages. And as an experience, as an entertaining reading experience, it was definitely one of the best of the year for me. Um, it is a quintessential fantasy book. And if you just want a quintessential fantasy book, you'd be hard pressed to find a better starting point than Malice. And I'm really looking forward to the other three books in that series. Right, let's find ourselves. Here we go, something a little bit different. Agatha Christie. I'm going to bump this above The Great God Pan. Do I bump it any higher? I don't know. I'm not sure if I rate it as highly as The Island of Dr. Moreau. Doesn't really, it's not a book that goes for big themes and kind of big picture. It is, it's about the plotting and it's about the characters involved. And though the supporting cast isn't the strongest, there are some good characters in there. But Hercule Poirot is one of the best characters of the year. He makes this book. He takes what would have definitely been kind of a 2.5 to 3 star read and a very solid mystery book, and he propels it into a very good book, a very good book indeed. Very good, verging on great. I really enjoyed The Mysterious Affair of Styles. It was the first book in the recommended kind of Poirot Agatha Christie reading list, and I'm really looking forward to Murder on the Links following this one. And I hope it can kind of maintain that same level. Yeah, very satisfying little mystery. I did not get what was happening. I'm going to be honest. I didn't really know what was happening until Poirot kind of led me along by the hand, but it was very entertaining either way. Right, next book. This is a bit different. I mean, I'm going to put Rainbow Six in here somewhere in the high. Yeah, it's probably about a 4 star read, I should say. It's a big book. I think the paperback is some 925, 930 pages, but I read the hardback. It's about 750 pages. It is a big book, and it has so many characters and points of view and perspectives that you're given, whether you are one of the good guys or one of the bad guys, or maybe a kind of third party that is kind of been swept up in this thriller. It is a military thriller. There's a lot of jargon. It's not going to be for everyone, but the plotting is pretty good. The set pieces are excellent. A couple of the characters are very well realized, even though some of the others maybe less so. But it will certainly get your mind thinking and wondering, where is this going, how will this end, and it's got good momentum. It carries you to the end of the book, which ultimately was a bit of a letdown, the ending, but as an experience, as a journey, it's probably about a 4 star read. Right, so Eye of the World, the first book in the Wheel of Time. I'm going to place Eye of the World next to The Two Towers. Eye of the World is a fairly slow-paced book, and it is a big book. But the world building is pretty good. It's a pretty good starting point for world building, and the characters. It takes some time for the characters to get going as well, but I really believe once you're 200-300 pages into this book, the characters really come into their own. And this is an excellent kind of mainline fantasy. This is kind of classic swords and sorcery, but it is done well. It's done really well, and I might as well, let's just go grab The Great Hunt now. So I'm going to pop The Great Hunt up here. I'm going to put it above Emperor Thorns and Pride and Prejudice. This book kind of went beyond my expectations. It was so much better than Eye of the World. The pacing was better, the character work was better, the plotting was better. I felt much more invested. I feel like Eye of the World was the foundation that The Great Hunt was built on. And I think The Great Hunt is one of the best fantasy books that I read this year. And I'm really excited for the third book in The Wheel of Time. And I've told that there's another jump in quality between The Great Hunt and the third book. So I'm really excited to see how that goes. So King of Thorns, I feel, was the weakest of the Broken Empire trilogy books. I'm actually going to place it below Emperor of Thorns. Yeah, right around here behind Sharp's Tiger. I feel like it did suffer from middle book syndrome. I know a lot of people find that this is the case, and a lot of people jump off of the series around at this point, where it starts to get a bit hectic. The set piece is still great. It's still very entertaining. It's still very darkly funny, but it is definitely a rung below the other books in the trilogy, unfortunately. So if people do bounce off at this point, I kind of understand, but it is still a very decent and solid book. Frozen Hell. So this is Who Goes There, but it is taken from the original manuscript, and it is the full version. So there are 3 new chapters at the beginning of the book that really kind of introduce us more to the setting and the characters and allow it to be grounded a little bit better. It does extend it from a short novella into a kind of a mid to longer length novella, and I'm going to whack. In fact, it's almost novel length, I suppose you could say. Frozen Hell. I'm going to whack it right in between Mysterious Affair Styles and Great God Pan. Now it's right around there. It's one of those, very good, almost great books, where I felt like it was quite effective and entertaining, but it didn't stay with me for a long time after I read it. It was very much, this is a great couple of days reading, very enjoyable, and definitely a welcome part of my spooky season. Another book I read during spooky season was Richard Matheson's I Am Legend. I'm going to pop that at the top of this. I would say 3.75 is pretty much bang on for this book. Some very good themes in this one. Very dark, post-apocalyptic kind of story. It's a great horror story. It's very intense. Does it have the best prose? Probably not. Are all the characters particularly likable? Are they meant to be? Who knows? But do you know what? It delivered. By the end, it kind of delivered on I think what the themes that it was going for, and the ideas around the book, and the nature of this world. And it was definitely a intense and entertaining read. Entertaining is definitely the right word for this next book. Sharp's Triumph. I wouldn't say it was better than Sharp's Tiger, but it is almost more of the same. I'm going to whack this down. Do you know what? Let's put it down here next to Mort, because I feel I enjoyed these 2 books to a very similar level, if not in the same fashion. Sharp's Triumph, we're back with Richard Sharp. He's now a sergeant, but guess what? It's still, kind of balls to the wall action. He's in it up to his neck as usual. There's a fantastic antagonist in this story. And yeah, I think, around about the 4-star mark's probably about right for Sharp's Triumph. Another great entry, Bernard Cornwell, born author. Fantastic. A controversial one. Assassin's Quest. I'm going to pop Assassin's Quest behind the 2 Towers. The 3rd book in the Farseer trilogy. I think this is a very divisive book. I've seen people that really do not like this book, and I've seen people that think this is the best book in the trilogy. This book, the prose in this book is excellent. The character work is excellent, if misguided. I feel like the way some of the characters are written in this book is a little inconsistent with the other 2 entries in the series. And the ending of the book is rushed, despite an extremely elongated middle section to the book. I think the first third of the book is excellent, but from there, I think it loses its way, and it ends up actually being the weakest of the 3 books in the Farseer trilogy. And I'm going to say this book is probably the reason more people don't jump straight into Live Ship, and why Live Ship is now seeing a resurgence is probably the fault of Assassin's Quest, which might come across as controversial, but that's how I see it. So I might as well go and grab Royal Assassin right now and tell you that I actually think this book. I'm going to put Royal Assassin between Pride and Prejudice and Emperor of Thorns in the excellent category. I think Royal Assassin is the jewel of the Farseer trilogy for sure. It doesn't need to give you that grounding and slice of life that Assassin's Apprentice does. It has the page count to expand on its characters and its plotting more than Assassin's Apprentice does, but it doesn't waste the reader's time. It doesn't get bogged down in trying to justify things and wrap things up in the way that Assassin's Quest does. So Royal Assassin gets the best of both worlds. It really is the pure experience of the Farseer trilogy, and it is a great read, an excellent read, some might say. Right, not that many books left. The Fall of Numenor is a new release. I'm going to put The Fall of Numenor. I'm going to put The Fall of Numenor just behind The Island of Dr. Moreau. I feel like The Fall of Numenor is mostly a book that can be used as a reference text. It is a chronicling of the kings of Numenor for a large part of it. It is a small history lesson in how Numenor was founded and kind of, you know, what happened at the start of the Second Age. And then towards the kind of middle to 2/3 of the way through this book, you are given more kind of classic storytelling, and we get to kind of live with a couple of the different rulers and a couple of the different main shakers and movers of Numenor at the time. And that section there, where we're kind of like a couple of thousand years into the founding of Numenor, up until kind of the start of the Third Age, there's actually some good stories there, and it does kind of hit on some of the highs of kind of the Great Tales and the Silmarillion. So very pretty book, very well written book, extremely useful and interesting to someone that is into Tolkien's world. But from an outsider's perspective, it's not going to hit the same heights. The Maltese Falcon, I'm going to put, I don't know, Assassin's Quest. I'm going to put the Maltese Falcon here for now. I'm not exactly sure where this lives, but I do believe it is a great book. I love Sam Spade. I think, even though some of the characters are quite, they're quite stylized in the way that they're depicted in the story itself is excellent, and it is very entertaining, and it's an entertainment first mystery. I think it's definitely a book of its time. It won't be for everyone, but if you're like me and you like noir, noir movies always rank extremely highly in my own personal taste, and the books tend to hit home as well. And The Maltese Falcon, fantastic book. Right, there's a lot of books down here now. Let's take a Study in Scarlet. I'm going to put Study in Scarlet above Call of Cthulhu, but below Great God Pan. Now, it's really a book of two halves. Study in Scarlet started as almost a short story mystery to me, and the second half of the book, if everyone has read it, it takes a wildly different turn, but that actually drew me into the character that is the heart of the story much more, and it propelled the book above kind of an average rating. And yeah, I think I gave it comfortably over 3 stars in the end, but it's a good starting point, though I don't think it is the perfect mystery novel. The Blade itself, I'm going to put right here, just above the Great Hunt. I don't know if it is an amazing book. It gets amazing reviews, and I was extremely impressed with it. I loved 2 of the characters in particular, Sandan Glokta and Giselle Danlufa. I think were extremely well realised, and their chapters in this book are some of the best chapters that I read this year. But overall, the story and the supporting cast don't come across as strong as I was expecting, and ultimately it just misses out on the top tier. Its highs are extremely high, but it doesn't quite hit the heights that I think maybe some of the books in the series do for other people. The Return of the King, Lord of the Rings, The Return of the King. I'm going to place this, I'm trying to place this above Malice. The Return of the King, I think, is the greatest good versus evil story that I have ever read. It has some of the purest and most well realized and the best integrated themes that I've ever seen in a fantasy book. It There's very few books that could bring me to a state of emotion like Lord of the Rings would. And being of an age long before the movies came out, my introduction to Tolkien was some 10 years before the movies came out. So for me to get through the Lord of the Rings in one sitting for the first time, Return of the King was a very affecting read, and definitely deserves its place at the top of this list currently. Prince of Thorns. So this book is written in a way that I hadn't really read a book like it before. It is bombastic, aggressive, extremely fast-paced, a shock to the system. And I'm going to place it. It belongs in this area around here somewhere. I'm not 100% sure where I would put it. Probably a little under Emperor of Thorns, which is probably, to be fair, much of a muchness with The Great Hunt as Prince of Thorns is with Royal Assassin. I think Prince of Thorns is a short, sharp hit of a book. It's a page turner. It's over very quickly. It's not for everyone. But what it does and what it executes on, I think it does almost flawlessly. I think Mark Lawrence wrote the book he wanted to write, and he probably wouldn't change much of it. So whether it is your cup of tea or not isn't really indicative of its quality. It's a good introduction to the trilogy, though it doesn't hit the kind of heights of character and theme and the rest that we get from Emperor of Thorns. It's still a very entertaining read. As is The Last Wish, which I'm going to place right next to Prince of Thorns. The Last Wish, as a short story collection, is almost perfect. It delivers very entertaining short bursts of story. It has lots of darkly comic humor, some fantastic characters, and I think for some reason at the moment, the Witcher series of books isn't really getting the recognition it deserves, and quite a few people are kind of hating on it or putting it down. And I may also get to that point, but I think at the moment I'm riding that initial wave that everyone did when they read The Last Wish, and that I'm surprised at the amount of quality in the writing and the insights Andre gives into the kind of fairy tales that we take in Western culture, and their interpretations in a more dark and adult world. Yeah, very, very highly rated. What to go with next? I suppose that we've already talked about the Blade itself, so let's talk about Before They're Hanged. I'm going to put Before They're Hanged up in this top tier. There's a couple of reasons for this. I loved Glocta and Giselle in the first book, but I felt that the Bloody Nine and Baez and these other kind of supporting, what I would consider supporting characters. I suppose Logan Ninefingers is probably meant to be the main character, but it never felt that way to me. I feel that the supporting characters of the trilogy really start to shine in the second book. I feel like the plot actually starts to go somewhere in the second book, and this might be a little bit of bias, but I love a good siege, and the siege in Before They Are Hanged is excellent, and this is definitely one of the best reads of the year for me. Well, I've been avoiding this because I don't want to start freaking out too much, but War and Peace by Leo Tolstoy, I'm going to put straight to the top of the list, straight to the very tippity top of the list. This is a book that is so affecting. It is a book full of character and themes. I mean, I couldn't think of an important theme that this book doesn't tackle. Whether it's, class systems, the effects of war, critical thinking, life after death, quality of life, love, human nature, how to live a good life. I feel like the characters in War and Peace are a reflection of yourself as you read. They're a reflection of, it's like you're looking in a mirror at yourself, and also you are viewing yourself through the eyes of the author. And I don't even know how it's done. It's the reading equivalent of watching like Inception or something. You feel like you're falling down a rabbit hole constantly as you're reading it. This won't become apparent until several hundred pages in, but the way the book delivers, it didn't even seem possible when I started reading books for it to be like this. But yeah, War and Peace, very, very highly rated, very much recommendation. And then finally, the last book I haven't rated, I'm actually going to place above War and Peace. I think The Fellowship of the Ring is still the best fantasy book I ever read. Is it the best book I ever read? I don't know. Top 5, definitely. The prose in this book it's just unfair on the other books here. Even Robin Hobb and Leo Tolstoy didn't touch the beauty put onto the page by Tolkien. I know he probably has an unfair advantage. He can lean on kind of a language and a race of beauty in the Eldar and in Quenya that you can't use in a lot of other books. But the world is near perfect. Obviously, people have spoke at length about how they would love to live in Tolkien's world, and I think he captures a slice of British life that has been lost in a way he describes Hobbiton and the surrounding human villages like Bree and stuff, is talking about a way of life that existed when he wrote these books. I mean, if you look at Children of Hurin, that was actually written well over 100 years ago. His first manuscript of that was, pre-World War One. He's really talking about a life that isn't really there anymore. Especially not in this country. But this is a book that sets up so much foreshadowing and so many themes. It's an infinitely quotable book. Just go on the Goodreads for this book and see what people say about it. It's a book of purity and a book of beauty, and a read that is good for the soul. The Fellowship of the Ring, by far the strongest book in my opinion in the trilogy, and probably the best book that I read this year. Well, thanks for sticking with that. I know it's probably an extremely long video at this point. I don't know how long I've been talking, and I'm sure I bored you all. But it was good for me to kind of lay this out in front of me. This doesn't look anything like I thought it would look. But I think, I'm mostly happy with where everything is. And it was a great reading year. And looking at what I've got on my slate for next year, I think it's going to be even crazier than this year. The classics I've got left to read, the series I've got to continue, the series I've got to start. It's going to be a crazy ride next year, and I may even add to this list, or do I start a new list? I don't know. Right, thanks for sticking with me, guys.